disclosure, right now it is 2 o'clock in the morning for me because I just last night flew in from Croatia, where I was leading a group to Medjugorje in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where I actually experienced my call to the priesthood 30 years ago. And I went there as an anniversary in this month of June, this past June, because it was then that I celebrated my 20th year as a priest. So I'm really grateful. And let me tell you, when I felt called to the priesthood, it was really shocking. I shouldn't be a priest. My brother should be the priest. He's nice and everything. How is he not a priest? I'll tell you. He has 7 impediments. His wife and 6 kids. So I'm it. And it was very strange because after that priest challenged us to learn about our faith, I then went to Medjugorje because my brother paid for a trip, and I just thought a free trip to Europe. And lo and behold, the Blessed Mother really spoke to my heart, and I felt this call that I actually started to go to church every day, not just on Sundays. I'm the kid who hated church, but I started to go during the week, which I really encourage you to do. But it was very challenging because I was the only young person there, so I would sit in the back, and all those old ladies with blue hair started to pray, and they had this vocation prayer, and this is what it looked like because I was sitting in the back. All I saw was the back of their head, and they would say, "Lord, help us to pray for young men." And they were looking at me because I was the only one there. And those little old ladies' prayers work, let me tell you. Prayers work. But ultimately, I became a priest 20 years ago with the formation process that I had no idea when I studied in Italy for 6 years. I had no idea that God was going to use a little simple Filipino priest to host an international food and faith movement called Plating Grace. I had no idea that I was going to be on TV every Friday at 6:30. You should check the local list. I had no idea that my books would be bestsellers. I'm just saying. I had no idea that I was going to be on the Food Network, season 7, episode 1, beating Bobby Flay in a throwdown on the Food Network. I had no idea. No. But I think one of the reasons why all these crazy things keep happening is because I like surprises. And I hope you do too. I'm speaking to Couples for Christ. I'm speaking to a group of people who think that after so many years of marriage, what's surprising? It's all the same. And if that's the case, you're doing it wrong. Because Christ gives you new life. You see, Christ actually is a regenerator. To say that your life is stagnant means you're doing it wrong. And so, I'll tell you, when I started this whole thing, I didn't want to do it. In fact, I'm a priest, for God's sakes. I don't want to be on TV. The camera adds 5 extra pounds to you. So I really didn't want.
Earthquake.
It's an earthquake? Told you it's a surprise. Okay. So let's just ask the Lord. Let's just ask the Lord to deliver us. Okay. Ask the Lord to deliver us, to protect us, to give us strength and peace. Ask the Lord to surprise us with His love and keep calming remedy. Let's ask the Lord just to quiet our hearts and to quiet this ground, to make it holy. Ask the Lord to give us this peace. we ask you, Lord Jesus, to deliver us from all evils, from all fear, from all anxiety. Deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our day, that by the help of your mercy we may be free from all sins and safe from all distress, as we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Hallelujah. So we be safe. Let's just be safe. No matter what, we know what we need to do. But we're just here to continue to be a light. But also to know that God gives us life. You see, when I became a priest, I didn't plan on doing any of the things that I'm doing. In fact, this whole thing started on September the 11th, 2001. Do y'all remember that? I was supposed to go to France on September the 12th, 2001. But all the flights were canceled. And no big deal, because it gave me a chance to be back in church to take care of all these people who came to Mass that following Sunday. Do you remember? So many people came to church that Sunday. It was like Creasters came to church on... Do you know who Creasters are? Christmas, Easter. Creasters. But there were more than... There were Pacers who came to church. You know who Pacers are? People who pace themselves. They come on P, Palm Sunday. A, Ash Wednesday. C, Christmas, Easter. They pace themselves, okay? And you know why they come on Palm Sunday? You know why? Because you get something for free. And so at the end of that Palm Sunday Mass, it's like a Pier 1 Imports Wicker basket sale. It's amazing what they can do. You know why people come on Ash Wednesday though, right? Because you need the dirt on your face to prove you're a Christian. I always thought that it just proves you have to wash your face. But no, they think that you need the dirt on your face. In fact, some people don't care about Mass. They care about the ashes. They'll even say, Father Leo, can I just get the ashes to go? I say, would you like fries with that, man? Some woman actually showed up at my church and said, can I get the ashes to go? So I said, sure. Stick out your tongue. And would that be wrong? No. Because it's the truth. You don't prove Jesus from the outside. You prove Jesus from the inside. And how does Jesus get inside? You see, on that weekend, after September the 11th, my whole priesthood shifted. I was supposed to be in France, but then instead, me and these other priests, we went on a little retreat, which just happened to be in a beach house on the Jersey Shore. And as I was there cooking, because I know how to cook, I studied at the Cordon Bleu in Perugia. They wanted to watch the Food Network. All of the TV stations were canceled, and there was a simple sign that said, in light of the nation's tragedy, we encourage families just to cook and to eat together. And so my friend said, well, since we can't watch the Food Network, let's watch Leo cook. And then it was their idea that I should have a cooking show. And I said, that's the stupidest idea I'd ever heard. But they kept talking about it to the point where it became a thing. And then I wrote this book called Grace Before Meals, which was simply to bring feast days back to the table, to make sure that we're not boring. Do you know that if it weren't for our Catholic feast days, our economy would tank? Think about it. Christmas, that's our Saint Nicholas. Champagne, that's our Catholic monk, Dom Perignon. Wine and roses, that's our Saint Valentine, who shows that marriage and love is a sacrifice. He was a martyr. I bring back the feast days, including corned beef cabbage, green beer. Who eats that stuff? Even with rice, it doesn't taste that good. But you know what? On that day, I eat it. Because on that day, I'm Irish. And on that day, I even changed my name to Father Leo Patalinghug. That's who I am on that day. Because guess what? When we eat together, I don't care what the Olive Garden says, they stole our line. When you're here, you're family. And like we just had at Mass, Jesus ate with sinners. We're lucky because he eats with us. So that's what that's about. And when it became a bestseller, honestly, I thought I'm done. I have a best-selling book. They want me to be on TV. I beat Bobby Flay. What more could life give me? And really, it was shocking because then in prayer, God said, you're not done. If you really want to help families, start helping where families begin, and that is marriage. And that's why I wrote this book, Spicing Up Married Life. And I know what you're thinking. You're a priest. What do you know about marriage? And what do you know how to spice it up, right? Well, I'll tell you one thing. I know enough about marriage. I know I don't want to get married, okay? And the reason is because I'm not called to it. But more importantly, God and I are on a mission to get rid of anniversaries. Because we think they're stupid. And now all the women here are saying, I don't like that priest anymore. But all the guys are like, just listen, just listen. And when I say stupid, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. From the Latin, stupor, sleepy, slow. Why do you people wait 1 year to celebrate your love? With 12 chapters, you can celebrate month-iversaries. And now all the women are like, I like that priest. And all the guys are like, shut up. So I want to talk a little bit about marriage. Because guess what you are? You are the light of the world. Do you know that there are 2 sacraments that bring holiness into this world? One is priesthood and the consecrated life. And the other is marriage. And you do realize there's a problem here, because in order for me to be a priest, it took me 6 years after college to become a priest. For marriage, it takes 6 classes. Do you see the difference? So I think a lot of married life suffers because there is not a lot of information. So in order for you, couples for Christ, to be the light of the world, you have to know what L-I-G-H-T means. L is going to not stand for light, it's going to stand for listening. Because guess what? If you aren't listening to your spouse, she won't shut up. So figure it out. But listening is hard to do. Even though we only have 1 mouth and 2 ears, we are not willing to listen to the other. And marriage is all about the ability to have conversation, because conversation leads to conversion. Do you hear it? It's the same word. Conversation. Conversion. Which means turn to each other. But we are so diverted. That word diverted is the same root word as divorce. You're not turning toward each other anymore. So what's going to turn you together? And that's the truth. Because guys, if you are not feeding your wife with what she hungers for the most, she's going to do an Eve. You know who Eve is? Of course, and you know what she did? She went to another man. That's what happens. If we aren't willing to listen to what the other is hungering for, they're going to go elsewhere where they feel like they are being heard, seen, and understood. And so your job is to listen to each other, which is difficult because it requires active listening. And I'm not talking about that psychobabble nonsense of active listening with pop culture psychology that says, what I hear you say is, and then you repeat what they just said. That's not active listening. That's actively annoying. Active listening is, what is God saying to me through the other person? So, when women, your husband comes in from work and he falls asleep at the couch, what is God saying to you? Wake him up. Guys, if you fall asleep coming home from work and your wife says, mow the lawn, paint the fence, do the groceries, I don't know what she says. But if she says that to you, what is God saying to you? Mow the lawn, paint the fence, do the groceries. Or, how about this? Women, if your husband comes and falls asleep on the couch, what is God saying to you? Let him sleep. Oh, wait. Maybe God is also saying, make him a sandwich. Give him a beer. Massage his feet. Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea what God is saying to you. But the fact is, when you are experiencing struggles in your marriage, and you will, what is God saying to you? God is telling you something about the other person. You've got to be willing to listen. Because none of us here can speak perfectly, but God can. If you're willing to listen to what God is saying to you through the other person. And you know what that means? You will be a light because of listening and integration. This is a key word, which doesn't always make a lot of sense. Because oftentimes when we think of marriage and integrate, we oftentimes misinterpret it and think irritate. But that's not what we're talking about here. We got to talk about integration. Be people of integrity. That means, though, that you got it all together. When you integrate something, you put the pieces together. In other words, theologians, and you're all called to be theologians, you're called to integrate your faith with your humanity, with your virtues, with your flaws, with the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Guess what? That's you. You can't be anything else but an integrated reality of weeds and weeds. And you gotta be able to accept that. And so let me give you a definition of what a theologian does. They practice something called Gestalt. I know that is not a Filipino word. It's a German word. And as you can tell, I'm very German. But the term Gestalt means the whole is greater than the total sum of parts. Let me explain. Whole greater than total sum of parts. This is math, and I'm not a good Asian. I'm bad at math. But this will make sense if I say a box of puzzle pieces. That's all the parts. You've got the total sum. But it's not the whole until you put it all together. And that takes a long time. But when I was a kid, I was very hyper. I know that that's surprising to you because I'm so calm now, right? But when I was a kid, I was hyper, and my mom and dad, to keep me occupied, gave me a box of puzzle pieces, like 1,000 pieces. You know what I'd do? I'd be done in 20 minutes. It's not because I was smart, but because when my mom and dad finally figured out what I did, they realized, they knew that if I didn't see the pieces fit together, you know what I did? I found scissors and I made them fit. And what do you get at the end of that process? It is ugly. It is nothing but ugly. Because I didn't integrate the pieces patiently. You see, what you got to do is realize that your flaws are a part of you. Not to make you a horrible person, but to help you to be integrated as a normal person. In other words, you're a bunch of puzzle pieces, and we don't know how we all fit together. Guess what? You're still never going to figure it out, even after 50 years of marriage. I wrote this book for my mom and dad on their 50th wedding anniversary because I'm their favorite child. And my mom said, I've been married to your dad for 50 years. What am I going to do with this book? And I said, just read it. I wrote it for you and Dad. And a few days later, she read it and she goes, it's a good book. Because you know what it does? It integrates your life. From the moment you first met till death do you part. We don't think of these things, which is why I'm trying to get you to integrate your marriage. And making sure that even though you might not know where this piece fits, that you don't throw it away. Because it's still a part of you. Does that make sense? Because it's still part of the picture. And guess what? When you put it all together, it is beautiful. And why is that even beautiful, even though there's some ugly parts to it? Because of the G in light. We've got listening, we've got integration, and G is going to stand for generosity. God can make even an ugly cross into a sign of hope. Because that's how generous God is. When He gives to us His gifts, He gives to us the best and He gives the most. For example, the first miracle was the wedding feast where He turned into, and not just any water. It was water for cleansing, which means water to wash dishes or to wash people's feet. Ew. Why did He use that water? Because He wanted to take something very basic and bland. And what did He turn it into? Wine? No. Barolo, 1997. Classic Reserve. And why did He make such fantastic wine? And how much did He make? A lot. Why? College kids are like, party with Jesus. No, He doesn't want to get you drunk. That would be an abuse of His generosity. He made the best and He made the most to tell us that God ain't cheap. And neither should you be to each other. As He gives to us His body, blood, soul, and divinity, what do we give? Sometimes just an hour at Mass. Sometimes we even give God only 45 minutes. And some of us will leave right after communion. Which is why I want to put a sign on every church door that says, Judas was the first to leave too. Judas was cheap. He sold out his friends for 30 pieces of silver. And that's why G is a light when you are generosity for the other. That means you've got to give yourself body, blood, soul, and fluids to the other. Yeah, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people aren't willing to talk about. The S word. The S word. You know what it is, right? You know what the S word is, right? It's sacrifice. Because it's the same word. The sexual act is a sacrificial act. Because it is that moment when you don't think of yourself. You are there to give love to the other, for that's what they're craving. Or sometimes, don't give it, because that's what they're craving. And that becomes the sacrifice. And sacrifice is always generous. When you think of sacrifice, you think of an animal literally giving its life for that cultic practice of worship. And this is the moment where you too are sacrificing yourself. You are giving yourself completely to her. And she gives herself completely to you. And if this was 2 glasses of water half filled, he would be empty and she would be full. But that's not how it works. Because the sacrificial act requires you to give yourself and she to you, and therefore you have just died a spiritual death. That means in a sacrificial marriage, you no longer see life through your eyes, man. Man, you must now see life through her eyes. You must now see life through the lens of perfume, shoes, and purses. It will kill you. It will kill you. And women, you now have to see the life that you live through the lens of football, San Miguel, and stinky feet. That's your sacrifice. But that's the point. You've got to be generous with each other, because without, listen to the word, generosity, you will not have generations. You see, sacrifice is all about giving yourself completely so that you are receiving completely. Our Blessed Mother is a perfect example of that. She received everything because she was not contra the concept. You hear what I said there? You hear it? She was not contra the concept of God, of life, of receiving and giving. We've developed a contraceptive mentality, which is a form of lack of generosity. I don't want to give myself to you because I don't have to give everything in my time to a little mouth to feed. We've become that. And unfortunately, generations are being lost because we're not willing to make that sacrifice during that other very important S word, sanctification. Because if you're doing it right, it will make you holy. Which is why you got to invite God into every sacrificial, sanctifying sexual act. Because if you don't invite God into that, the devil will easily come in and make it feel like love, but without sacrifice. And therefore it ain't love. Does that make sense? G is a bright light, which will help you to experience the H of being a light, which is humility. And let me tell you something, folks. Humility ain't easy to preach about. Because as soon as I pray for humility, God answers my prayers. And sometimes gives me an audience full of people, and I realize my zipper is down. How humbling is it? Humility is one of these words that is, if you think you got it, you don't got it. Could you imagine if I got up here and I said, today, brothers and sisters, I would like to tell you about humility because I'm so good at it. I'm a master at humility. I wrote a book. It's a bestseller. How to Be Humble. I mean, it would be ridiculous, right? So maybe we don't have to look at it in terms of not showing off, because that wouldn't be true either. It would be a false sense of humility. If you've got a gift, you better proclaim it from the rooftops instead of burying it under a bushel basket. Because if that's what you think humility is, you're wrong. So let me explain. Love in marriage as a light is humble because of what the word means. From the Latin humus, humilis. It literally means dirt. That's why the most humbling thing you're going to experience is on a certain Wednesday, 50 days before Easter. 40 days technically, but really 50 if you count it all. Where you're going to have some ministers say, "You're dead. And to dirt you will return." Light requires humility. Because in our humility, we're going to realize something very powerful. We are dirt. And to dirt we will return. And that person that is sitting next to you who you married, he or she is not going to be here forever. It makes you approach life with a lot more humility, knowing that your love is in a delicate balance. And therefore, true humility has to recall the vows that you made. I will love you until death do we part. And that's not an easy thing to consider, which is why when you come with me on a pilgrimage to Rome, available at fatherleofeeds.com/travel, you will see a church called La Concezione Immacolata, right near Piazza Barberini. It's a church of Franciscans, and underneath you go to a crypt, and it is a unique crypt because it is a crypt made by the bones of 3,000 monks. The altar, bones. Chandelier, bones. Light fixture, bones. All of the altar arrangements and adornments, bones. And at the very end, you have a guy who's a skeleton, dressed as a Franciscan monk, holding a sign in several languages. And in English, it simply says this: "What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you will one day be." In other words, you're going to die. I don't know if you know that. But if you know that, you're going to live every day of your life with a sense of humility, knowing that we're eventually going to meet our Maker. And when you die, what will be your epitaph? How will people remember you? I just buried my grandmother, who was 101 years old. I was her favorite grandson, too. And it's amazing because when you hear people talk about her, they talk about her humility, her holiness, her love. One thing that will destroy marriage is arrogance. That's why Christ, through his apostle Paul, will say that love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not boast or put on airs. In other words, he's just giving you the definition of humility. And a humble person is therefore a patient person, right? And I'm not humble. I'm incredibly impatient. I'm incredibly impatient, which is why I don't pray for it a lot. Because I know that if I'm going to pray for patience, God is going to answer my prayers with a traffic jam. So I really don't pray for it some days. I'm being honest with you. If I have to go to Washington, D.C. or New York, and I know there's traffic, I'm going to say, God, I'm not praying for patience. I'm not going to pray for it, because I don't want to be tested today. And so, you know, it works. It's amazing. Even in rush hour, there's clear. And then all of a sudden, I'll see the brake lights, and I'll almost sense the Blessed Mother say, you better start praying for patience. But this whole idea of patience is rooted in humility. Because it's not about you, right? Humility is not about you. It's about you serving others. And that requires patience. Do you know what the word patient means? Well, I think you do, but I don't think you do. It comes from the Latin pati, the verb patior, passio, passionis. It's where we get the word passion. And you know what passion means, don't you? Unless you know what the verb pati means, you don't know what passion means. Because the word passion is the form conjugation of pati, the verb that literally means to suffer. That's why The Passion of Christ, the movie of Mel Gibson, it was all about a man who was suffering. That's why people in hospitals are called, because they are, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. No, that's Latin, okay? And the reality is, love, if you are humble, is going to test your patience. But we have become so addicted to not being humble, we think we're going to get everything we want immediately. At one point, there was a generation, a couple generations before, who didn't have big houses. They had a simple, modest house. And they had all of their family living in it. And they had to wait year after year to fill each house with furniture. These days we buy a house, we have it all. Like within the first month of our marriage. No, that's not patient. Our generation before, they knew patience. They had to take care of that couch, which is why it's still to this day, there's a plastic cover on it. Because they're humble and they're patient. And it is not easy, but let me tell you, when you see someone who's patient, like a spouse who's always patient with the other spouse's quirkiness, it's a light. And you see that person as a humble person. And you know what's interesting about humility? It requires you to be a servant, which is why I actually sell aprons. Because they're black. And therefore slimming. But I wear this simply because this is what a humble person wears. So I don't know if you have an apron, but you better have an apron. And there are limited left. And the reason why I'm even saying this is simply because if you don't have an apron, you're going to think you are called to be served rather than to be a servant. And therefore, this apron is telling you got to be a humble servant. Because if you're not going to serve your spouse, she's going to go somewhere where she will be served. See, it's all about this humility, and more importantly, about that patient servant that God is calling you to be. And I mention this clearly because servants are the heroes of every party. I was just talking to some of these young kids that are here, that are like servants to each other, and some of the people who are working on your staff, whether it be the music people or those people back there making me sound taller. And you know, I mean, all of these servants in the background. If it weren't for them, none of this would happen. They really are the superheroes. That's why I want to say, when I wrote this book, because people are always going to ask, so I better integrate it into my homily. This is my latest book. And it's called Saving the Family. And yes, there are recipes in here too, relax. But this is really a book on how to practice the theology of food, which I wrote about in this book. And I have to explain it because people don't understand all the different books. This book is talking about how Jesus not only became a servant, he became the food. This explains the Mass. This explains Eucharistic adoration. This explains who Jesus is as the bread. It tells you the making of bread and the making of wine. It's the same process of making a saint. That's what this book is about. There are no recipes, but food suggestions here. So this is a theology of food, and this tells you how to practice the theology of food so that you can become supper heroes. How to eat with your family. From the time when you are feeding your children mashed peas to the point when they're feeding you mashed peas. And every generation in between. How can you become a supper hero? And that's not bad Filipino pronunciation. That's me saying that if you are the one feeding your family, you are a hero. Because you wear this, all you gotta do is this, and you got a instant cake. Okay? You are truly called to be a hero. And what do we always say to the servant heroes? When someone does good service for you, what do we say to them? Which is the last letter of light. Thank you. Thanksgiving. The word in Greek, eucharistei, where we get the word Eucharist. It's manners, people. If you come with me to France, how do you say thank you? Merci. Which is mercy. That's a good pronunciation, Filipino. Very cool, very cool. Merci, which is mercy. How do you say it in Italian or in Spanish? Grazie, gracias. Grace. Do you hear it? Thanksgiving is sacramental. It is that opportunity that says, wow, I just experienced the light in my life. And every night I tell couples, you better learn how to pray together. And together, you better say, thank you, God, for giving me this husband who did these things for me today. Thank you for giving me patience when he didn't do those things for me today. But all I'm really asking you to do is to count your blessings. You know, oftentimes when I hear confessions, I'll have a spouse come in and they will say, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been whatever time since my last confession. Can I tell you what my husband did? He made me so mad. And I said, I don't care about him. I care about your sins. What are your sins, right? And then the next one is, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 3 weeks since my... Do you know what my wife did the last week? Why don't you guys just do it together? And then, but here's the thing. For their penance, you know what I make them do? I make them pray the Stations of their Cross on their knees on uncooked rice. No, I don't do that. No, I'm kidding. No. That would be too easy. No. Here's what I tell them oftentimes in confession. Your confession is to list all of your blessings. And then next to it, list all of your curses and struggles. I guarantee you that if you take this seriously, your Thanksgiving list will be way greater than your sorrows list. And if your other one is greater than the Thanksgiving list, you're living life wrong. You're just doing it wrong. That's all there is to it. Or you're really annoying. And if you're really annoying, then you're living life wrong. If you live life with an attitude of gratitude, you experience the beatitude. I didn't plan that, but that was really poetic, wasn't it? Sing a song about that. Right? No, but it's God's honest truth. That's why Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness. Blessed are those who have an attitude that isn't so grumpy all the time. Which is why a thanksgiving at Mass requires you to be joyful. Is this how you say thank you? Thank you. Or do you not say it like, thank you? If that's the case, can I ask you, why do people at Mass look so annoyed? I swear to you, they all look constipated. And you know what's spiritual? You know how constipation occurs, right? The same thing for the spiritual life. If you're constipated, it's because you're receiving, but not giving. So someone who is grateful will always be giving, because they know that what they have received is not for them. It's a gift for others. So that's why I'm saying, you want to be a light of Christ? Then you better listen. You better integrate. You better be generous. You gotta be humble. And you gotta be thankful. And those attitudes are so amazing. They're the greatest gifts we can give to our children. Because your kids are only going to learn about marriage from you. You are the primary educators of your children. Which is why when I wrote that book, it wasn't intended just for married couples. It was intended so that you married couples can be teaching your children how your marriage is a light for them. And I guess one of the reasons why people are choosing alternative forms of relationships is because the way that God intended it isn't being done well. They don't look happy in their marriage and like, why would I want that? I mean, I've seen couples just literally be so mean to each other. Why would anyone want that? In fact, this book was so helpful that, don't get me wrong here, I'm not supporting any of this, but I was at a book signing, like I just did outside, but which I don't actually have a lot of time to do because I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll explain that. But I still have about 10 minutes on this because we were Filipino and started 50 minutes late. But that's okay. But I was at a book signing, and this man with another man came up and said, "Is your book going to help our marriage?" Awkward. And it was only because of the light of the Holy Spirit that I was listening to what this man was saying. I was trying to integrate the reality that the LGBTQ, gay community, homosexual, same-sex, they're real. They are a part of our life. To try to dismiss them would be disrespectful. They're just a part of my life. It's a part of my family's life. What am I going to do? Dismiss a family member? They're still a part of my family. It's hard to find out how they fit, but they are part of the picture. Integrate. I gotta be generous. I gotta be humble and thankful. But so I listened to this man and he says, "Is this book gonna help our marriage?" And it was because of the light of Christ. I said, you know what? This book can help all relationships, even your relationship. Because this book will teach you that if you make Jesus the focus of your love, Jesus will teach you how to love each other, even if it means non-sexually. And the guy said, "That's adorable, I'll take it." And I said, "If you buy two, I'll give you a hug." He only bought one, but I gave him a hug anyway, because I want to let him know that I can love him, even if it means non-sexually. And you can see how what we need to do is get a better focus on Christ, who is the light. And Christ as a light is not annoying. You know, like how, have you ever had this happen to you? You're asleep and someone turns the light right in your eye and you want nothing more than to say, go away. Right? You just turn into this beast. No, that's not the kind of light that Christ is. Christ is that light that gives us hope in darkness. Christ is that light that warms us when we are cold. Christ is that light that helps you to see your spouse in a loving way, even if she's having a bad hair day. That is the kind of light that Christ gives. So I'm going to conclude, but I think that we have like about 7 minutes to answer questions. Because remember, the definition of boring is answering a question that no one is asking. So if you were bored at this talk, it's not my fault. Prove that you are not boring, and we're just gonna, if you have a question for me, you can stand and we'll try to get a microphone to you. If not, then we'll just ask you to speak out loud. Listen. By the way, because as soon as I leave, you're going to all ask me questions, I'm not going to talk to you. You have your moment. You have your moment. You have your moment. We'll take 5 questions. Just stand up if you've got a question. Stand up. Tell us your name. There you go. The microphone's right here.
Father, all of those on the floor are, this is a suggestion, not a question. All of those are parts. If you make it in a one goal, if you make it in a like a one package, it will be greater than those parts.
I didn't hear what you're saying.
If we consider those on the floor as parts, like a puzzle, if you make, it will be a lot better. If you put them together as one.
Oh, it's put together as a package deal? Oh, okay. By the way, this is my distributor. I'm kidding. So I wish I knew how to do that. I just write the things. I really don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't even know how it all goes, but yes. Let's put it this way. I'm not here to sell books. I'm really not. I'm here to give information, and I can't give everybody the information in an hour-long talk, which is why these books are some recipe. Well, 4 or 3 of them are recipes, but the others, they also have messages in them. That's what they're just resources. Hey, get what you want. Don't get any at all. I don't really care. You could always go to my website, which is fatherleofeeds.com. In fact, you can sign up for the free weekly email blast, and there's information there. I send out even, you're gonna love this, free shows for my podcast. And my podcast is, people are like, what is a podcast? Podcast. You're like my mother goes, what is a podcast? And so let me explain. It's radio on your computer, okay? It's a radio on your phone. Literally, if you just write down in the email thing, and my mother says, I do not know how to open the computer. So get your grandkids to do it for you. And just Google my podcast, which is very different because it's all about me having a conversation with people who aren't very Catholic, like an ex-convict, an ex-priest. I talk to a transgender before and after the surgery. I talk to a gay couple. I talk to all these people who think the Catholic Church hates me. No, I talk to you. I don't always agree with you, but I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm even going to have a conversation with a KKK member, but I'm going to do it on the phone because I'm afraid to meet them in person. But basically, I'm having a conversation with them. And so my podcast is called Shoot the Shiitake with Father Leo. Shoot the shiitake. You can figure that out, right? All right, so all of that stuff is free. You don't have to get these books, even though I really don't want to have them sent back home. I'm just telling you that you don't have to. But I will also say this, that Christmas is only 6 months away. Next question, next question. Next question. Yes, question in the back. Question in the back right here. Yes, sir, yes, sir. All right. Tell us your name.
Hi, my name is Chris from Southern California. I have a question. What if that same couple, two men, because our entry point to join Couples for Christ is through Christian Life Program.
I couldn't hear that.
The Christian Life Program, I'm not sure whether
Yes.
you're familiar with that. That's our entry point.
The
to
Christian
become-
Life Program, yeah.
Yeah, to get to become a Couples for Christ is through a Christian Life Program. And these two men said, we want to be couples for Christ.
Sure. So we
And
have
you
to
want
make
to-
sure that we respect them. We don't have to agree with them, and therefore they have to respect us, even if they don't agree with us. Does that make sense? If
Yes.
we approach them with humble, respectful love, they're not going to feel like we're attacking them or making them less of anything. But we just know that marriage, as a sacrament, has certain requirements and conditions. And not even a straight couple can get married in a Catholic church. They have to accept Christ and his teaching about sanctifying love before they can be considered truly a couple. That doesn't mean that they can't be companions in Christ. And that's actually what I shoot for when I talk to like someone who is in the same-sex relationship. I'll say, you know that I can't honor your experience as a marriage, but I can say that you are supposed to be companions for each other. And see that the word companion means kumpanis, with bread. All you're trying to do is break bread with each other, make sure that Jesus is the bread for you. And making sure that Christ is at the center of your experience. And making sure that sexual activity is not the reason why you love the other person. I knew a gay couple who was very much older. And one of them was so honest with me and says, oh God, we live like brothers anyway. And I'm like, this is creepy. But he just had to confess and say, they don't engage in a sexual act anymore. And they hadn't for many, many years. But they wanted to at least have companionship with each other. I'm not agreeing that that is a good thing, but I am saying that's not a bad thing. Does that make sense pastorally? Because they are still a part of this family. I've got to integrate them somehow. And the most challenging part is, a lot of times people think that if I am this way, I won't be loved by Jesus. Our job is to show them, yes, they are. Hope that makes sense. Question here? Third question. Okay, good. Because I'm glad, because this side was winning. Tell us your name and your question, please.
I'm Purisima Narvaez from Glendale, California. And this is my first time to attend this kind of conference with the Couples of Christ because of some beautiful, interesting members of the couples that got us in here. So, Father, isn't he amazing? Yes!
Oh, was that the question?
It's a Father. Now, anyways, the question is, Father, I'm proud to be a Filipino, but I'm proud in knowing you, God in you, with your gift of wit and humor. Where did you get it, and how did you get it? That's the question.
This is a very good question. Because I am generally not witty, I'm sharp. And I'm generally not humorous either, but I do make fun of people. So, I was not supposed to be a priest. My brother should have been, because again, he's nice, but I'm the priest now in the family, but I wanted to be a lawyer. I studied political science and journalism, which is why if you follow me on Twitter, at Father Leo Feeds, if you follow me on Twitter, you're going to see I get very political and I'm sharp. I never speak badly against a person, but I do challenge people's principles and policies on both sides of the aisle. So people are like, what are you, a liberal? Are you conservative? I'm like, no, I'm just trying to critically think of principles and policies. But I wanted to be a lawyer, but my mother says, you'll be a good lawyer, you'll be rich, you'll go to hell. So, in order for me not to go to hell, I decided to take on a higher law, the law of love. And so I took my very impatient, I'm incredibly impatient, I've said all this, very impatient, very sarcastic, very sharp-tongued, all of these things, I put them into Jesus' hands. And he took that bitter herb in me and drizzled a vinaigrette on it. And there's a great recipe in this book here. That was 3 questions. I'm taking 2 more. Taking 2 more. Okay, hold on a second. This side is winning again. And the people in the back, you're losers right now. I'm telling you, I know where the good Catholics sit. Stand up and give us your question.
Hi, Father. My name is Marvin, and I'm from Northern California. And I tell our community here that Father never fails to really amaze the crowd. I've been attending the LA Congress for several years, and I've been attending your session. It's always crowded, jam-packed, I could say that. And when you buy his books, there's a long queue of people who would really buy his books.
I'll pay you later.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Father. Thank you. Okay, so my question is, Father, of course, we're doing the work of evangelization, and one of the challenges that we face as a community is how to attract young people. So what is it that you could advise us on how we could attract young people to be a part of the church, be active in our community?
I love it. That's a great question. And actually, it begins at home. It really begins at home. I'm impressed. I have seen a lot of young people here. And it's because they have no choice. I realize that. But that's not a bad thing. Because when my mom and dad were trying to get their kids to go to Mass, I was a fighter. I didn't like it. But you know what my mom and dad did? They let me know that they're not giving us the faith to hurt us. This isn't supposed to hurt. So you've got to be sincere and let them know. Do you think that I'm really trying to hurt you by sharing my faith with you? How is it going to hurt you? So have that dialogue and have a mature conversation with them. And then at the same time, you're allowed to use guilt. So there were times when my mom and dad would tell me I have to go to church and be like, I don't want to go to church, I'm just boring. And so you know what my mother would do? She would fake a heart attack. And so I don't want to be responsible for that, right? So I think you've got to have honest conversation. You have to impose rules and regulations because that helps them to realize that if they're going to be treated as an adult, it's only because they're acting like one. And the other thing that I need you to do is to hear their questions. Do you feel another tremor here?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to continue to pray and asking God, and as soon as I said tremors, right? You have to hear their questions. You have to allow them to be willing to ask you anything and encourage them if they do have questions. You may not be able to answer them, but some others can. I recommend you send them on a dynamic experience, like a Steubenville conference, like a retreat with the NET, National Evangelization Team, or you send them on a pilgrimage with me. Because remember, that's how it started with me. I saw the church no longer as a parishioner. You know, those 4 walls all the time. I became a pilgrim, and I believe that being a pilgrim will save the church because you're allowing them to explore and to ask those questions You know, maybe you can come with me on one of my incredibly amazing trips. Maybe you can. Please come. If you can't, try becoming a pilgrim and maybe just going one Sunday a month or once every 6 months. Go to your cathedral or to another Catholic church. Just leave your envelopes at your home parish, okay? If the priests are here, you're welcome. But you know what? Be a pilgrim. Maybe go to a different Mass time. Or even more challenging, sit in a different pew. Oh. In other words, open up their minds, make them pilgrims, put them on a search, and allow them to see how amazing this world is because of our Catholic faith. Do you know the only reason why these countries have tourists? It's because our churches are so beautiful, it brings them. And the food is good too. And that's Catholic. Did I see a question on this side? No? Oh, I did see a question, yes. And by the way, women, you were the losers of this, Sarah. They were all guys except for one, huh? All right, usually it's the other way around. Yes, sir.
Francis Cruz from Arizona.
Okay.
Okay, Father, as you are being used by the Holy Spirit, I know we have observed that, but I know there are challenges and obstacles in life, especially there are even temptation. How do you handle it?
Me handle temptations? Oh, I usually give in to them. No, I'm kidding. Oftentimes the temptations come when I need to halt, when I'm, hungry, when I'm angry, when I'm lonely, and when I'm tired. Which is why I have to take care of myself. I'm so busy all the time that tomorrow morning I'll be saying Mass at 3:30 in the morning because I have to catch a flight at 5 o'clock. And then after that, I'm going to go and celebrate with my family my mother's 80th birthday. The day after that, I have to immediately go to another conference. So I'm always busy. And I think one of my greatest struggles and temptations is not taking that time for myself. So I think what we've got to do is know ourselves well. I also have a spiritual director and a regular confessor. I also have a regular prayer life that I don't mess around with. I pray all the time. Even if it's not maybe the prayer that you think about, sometimes I pray, God, what am I going to cook tonight? And some of these recipes are in those books. And someone actually said to me, I think that's disrespectful. You shouldn't be talking to God about recipes and things that are so banal and so secular. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because God wants to talk to me about things that matter to me, like what am I going to cook? That matters to me. And so the reality is, I try to live an honest life. And I know that I fail miserably. And that's why I thank God I'm Catholic. We've got confession. And that's the key. I've got to be humble enough about that. So what I want to do is bring this to a close, because I know that I'm now about 5 minutes over. It's your fault. I want to just close with a thought and really a story about a man who taught me how to love. A lot of times people look at my collar and they think, I'm going to ask him about God. Well, guess what? You don't have this around your collar. You've got it around your ring finger. You've got a sign of fidelity on your hand, which is the left hand closest to the heart. And there was a man that I went to visit because he was dying, Mr. Giamari, in room 358, I think. Several years ago, I went to anoint him because he was dying in a nursing home. It stinks in a nursing home. How did I find God there with an old man hunched over with tubes attached, and he was sitting on his porta potty? And I just realized in talking to him that this man had just lost his wife 3 weeks ago. And I think he was dying of a broken heart. Because he was married to his wife for over 60 years. And he kept talking about how much he loved his wife. And so at the end of this homily, I gave him communion, offered him a blessing. And then he said, Father Leo, call this number. Call this number. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll call this number. Maybe he wanted to talk to his kids. I dialed the number and he goes, and I handed the phone back to him and he goes, no, you listen, you listen, listen. And he looked at me really strangely and I'm thinking, what kind of number did I dial here? But I listened and the phone rang about 5, 6, 8 times and then an answering machine kicked in. It was a woman's voice. This is the Giamatti residence. No one can take your call. Leave a message. Beep. And as I was questioning what I was listening to, I looked at him and tears were coming down his face. And he said, I bought an answering machine a couple months ago and I left a message, but my wife didn't like it. So she changed it. And I'm so glad she did, because that is her voice. And I listen to it every night. You see, that listening, that integration of even sorrow and sadness, that generosity of letting his wife leave the message, that humility and thankfulness shows us that if you are truly couples for Christ, you not only become the light of the world, you tell people that the love that God gives you is a love that will truly take you out of this world. God bless you all.
Father Leo.